everyone, it's your girl Mojy Show,
And I'm Troy.
and you're welcome to our brand new show called Bridging the Gap. What are
Well,
we doing here?
So, the goal in Bridging the Gap is to bring you guys and us a lot closer between the African and the African American. We want to cut all boundaries and barriers and be able to evolve and create a better community for our community.
Well, to me, what does it mean to bridge the gap? Well, I I really just want to bridge the gap between myself as an African. I'm African, by the way, and people like you.
People
And
like
I don't
me.
even like saying people like you because I really want us to be the same people.
We are the same
At the end
people.
of the day, we have almost the same, skin complexion. So I don't want to feel, I guess, left out or people tell me you don't get it because you're not,
Yeah.
an African American. So yeah, that's just where we are, and socially bridging the gap, and economically bridging the gap, and even politically bridging the
100%.
gap.
So I think the bridge of the gap needs to be created to see ourselves evolve a little bit more and be able to push. I really don't feel like anybody outside of maybe the African and the African American see us as different. So why are we seeing each other as different, right? We come
Exactly.
from the same grassroots, and a lot of our indifferences are pretty similar when you really dig it down to the root of everything.
Yeah.
The things that you don't like or the things that I don't like, even though we come from two different demographics, they're pretty similar. So, and I just feel like the more and more that we meet on common grounds, the more we can uplift each other and show each other a better way and have a better understanding. And as far as the Black American, it'll help give us more of our heritage and our history to be able to know where we come from, to know where we want to go.
Because I mean, just buttressing off what you said, because at the end of the day, just to put it in perspective, we go out and we get pulled over by a white cop. He, we are the black suspects. It's not, oh yeah, we have this African suspect and then we have this African American suspect. We're black,
100%.
we're black people. So, but why do we, when we're in a gathering, it becomes okay, the Africans and the African Americans. Talking about African Americans, let us define the term African American. What is your take on that?
So my personal take on the term African American. Before we talked, I used to take that term as an offensive term or a derogatory term. When hearing it come from somebody else, I feel like they're trying to definitely put me in a box to say that I'm not just American, but to say that hey, they come from
You
that place
come
that we
from
don't really
that you
like,
don't know nothing about.
right? That we don't really like, or that they came from doing something that we don't care about, or they're beneath us. So I always put that as like a derogatory sense. But once meeting you, I understand that, or think that I understand that I want to embrace that culture, so I want that title to be associated with me a little bit more. I want you to know that I do have more than just the American background, that I do have an official background that, it definitely puts me into a category of saying, hey, I am a part of something and I'm not just losing myself out here as a black man.
Because with me, I feel like being an African and being, I guess, an American, I guess it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've lived in Africa and
Yes.
I've lived in America. So I feel like I still don't like being called an African American
Mm-hmm.
because I'm African. So I feel like I'm more relatable
Mm-hmm.
to be called an African American because
100%.
I know Africa and
Yes.
I know America. I've lived half of my life in Africa and half over here. So it's like I have the balance. I feel like I have the right to be
Yes.
called an African American than you or any other black person who's never been outside of the
And that
country.
used to be my feeling when I was a kid. That would be my statement to say, like, don't call me an African American. I'm a black American. I've never been to Africa. And now that I have been there, and understanding that we're all one community.
Because even like with me, being when I was back home, back in Africa, Nigeria to be precise, we we don't call African Americans African Americans. It's just Black
just black
Americans.
Americans.
Straight up Black Americans. Let me say me. I never thought Black Americans really have any attachment to Africa per se. So it's just okay. They're black, and they happen to be living in America. When I was younger, I never necessarily knew how they got there, because until, I started learning about slavery and whatnot. So I
100%.
never thought it was. But yeah, let me just ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up and, from like high school, I mean, from elementary school to like high school age, maybe some college, what were your perspectives on Africa and Africans?
So
The
the
stereotypes, the everything.
stereotypes, so everything that goes along with being a black American or African American, and then embracing or seeing that African kid come into school was everything that you could think negative, right? They were poor in my head. They didn't have any money. They could barely speak. They had this crazy accent that nobody can hear, so we make fun of them for that. Their hair texture is different. Their skin complexion is darker. So everything that is taught to be the bad things as far as a black person, now we just push it off on the African because like you're even beneath the lowest level of the black American or the African American. So that's how
It's
we
like
treated all of
we're
the
here
African
and the
kids,
Africans are
and the
here.
Africans were here, right? Like we finally get that one sense of I'm better than somebody, right? That superiority of feeling like, hey, these people are coming from this country and I know they're poorer than me because I don't know. I don't know if you really do have it.
Now I have someone to pick on.
Yeah, now I have somebody to pick on. It's like I become the big brother, and now I have that
It's
feeling
like,
of like power almost. Like I can look at this person and say I can do so much more than them, right? And that's where it all starts, and it cultivates from there, as opposed to embracing you and trying to learn your culture and wanting to know where you come from. As a kid, it gets pushed aside. But on the flip side to that, the African kids didn't always like us. They looked at us differently. So how did you coming from Africa or coming from Nigeria, what's your perspective on wanting one to be considered an American? Do you or don't you? And what was your perception of how Black Americans or African Americans act, or your thought process prior to coming here? How did you feel about Black African Americans?
well, I never really thought much about African Americans before moving to America. I just saw America as a white man's land.
Hmm.
You know, I didn't really know there was such a large representation. There's a good number of, African Americans. And then moving to America, I moved to Rhode Island, a really, really small state. People really think Rhode Island is like a white state. But I'm from
Yes.
Providence. And Providence is a mixture of everything.
It's the hood.
You see more brown than you see white. So there's mostly, and then the African community is quite large. So, and then even the black community is also large. So it's like, okay, but there wasn't really much of a difference for me, like culturally, because I was mostly surrounded by Africans.
Yes.
So I didn't really get that black culture
Yeah.
living in Rhode Island. So, and from coming to America, and what I've heard people say, Nigerians use the term akatas to describe the black people, which is somewhat not a nice word, but we're so used to it. Because, like, you see Africans as beneath you, we see African Americans as beneath us.
Yeah.
Because we feel they're not as educated as we are. They're not as intelligent as we are. They don't hustle as we do. So it's like, and they're poor. They're like Section 8.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For
Yes.
real. That's how me growing up in America, how I saw black people. Like, outside of my circle was very, very small. It was surrounded by mostly, Nigerians and Africans. So I didn't really see that much of successful black people.
Yeah.
Until I went to college. My advisor was black and she was very successful. She was very motivational. She was inspiring. And then I'm like, okay, well, we actually do have black people that go to school. Like black people that actually get good grades. And
So it wasn't until you went to college that it tricked
it
and
kind
flipped a little bit.
Yeah, because I went to a very small high school and it was mostly Hispanic. and Africans. We have a very few black African Americans in my school. And the African Americans in my school were bad. Like, they were really bad kids, you know. They were the ones that smoked, the ones that's always jumping people. So it was kind of like everything that people that were ahead of me told me was kind of like being manifested. And I'm like, okay, so this is how y'all want to be. I guess that was what kind of stopped me from actually trying to.
And that was my next question. What made you not want to even attempt to embrace it? Like, you seen people that were of the same pigmentation of you. What made you be like, they're different still? Like, being new here, what didn't cause you to say, I want to be a part of that? They're the same color. Like, let me try to fit in. Were you pushed away from the very beginning?
I guess it was just ghetto. You know what I mean? I hate that word, but that was just what they were doing wasn't
a representation of
what I do. You know what I mean? And it's not something I want to learn about. You know, even though my other African brethren wasn't so far away from that, but I was still drawn to them. Like, you know what? I can change you. I can make you see right and make you feel, act the way you're supposed to act, because at the end of the day, I feel like I'm an ambassador. Like, Nigeria sent me here to represent. You know what I mean? And I don't want to be that African kid. I don't really hear so much of African people going to jail. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I've been, there was a kid in my school that went to jail like freaking 3 times even before. He never even graduated.
Yeah. So, with all of that being said, when you did flip that switch and now you embrace that instructor, was it ever a time, or will it ever be a time where you want to embrace the African American culture more, or are you scared that you're going to lose your Nigerian or African culture more? So is it a fine balance, or are you just like, no, I just want to stay on this side and let them be them?
Up until recently, I was really, really close-minded as far as how far I want to go into learning and being a part of the American culture. Because I feel like I want to protect what I have. Because before anything, I am Nigerian.
Yes.
So, and I didn't want to, I don't know, get lost.
Like, you didn't even feel like I have time to do that,
I didn't want to get lost, Trust me. And over time, since I've been here, I've worked with, now just thinking about it, I actually just realized I never really worked with black people. I really didn't until I moved here. And then I was around a whole lot of black people. Like, my former work was like black people. And then I see a different perspectives. I see, different lifestyle, and it was interesting. To me, it was a learning experience, because even back when I was in Rhode Island, I always only hear about the African American food. I never really
hear anything else that's in a positive light, right?
I never really tasted the food. I've only heard about it. I know, okay, they have soul food. What is soul food? I'm sorry, I still like my jollof rice and my fufu and my eba. I'm not about to, like, you cook garlic greens and there's no pepper in it. Like, what is that? So it's like.
So part of it sounds like you just don't want to get lost from your culture, and I get it. And a part of it, in the same sense, on my end is, I have visited the country, and I have visited the continent and seen different countries and fell in love with different things that came along with going to Africa. But it's always this subconscious thought, like, do I want to embrace that all the way and now get ostracized from my own people, right? Do I want to wear the garb? Do I want to wear the clothing and look the part of an African man, as opposed to the black man in America, the African American? Because my black friends are going to be like, you're trying too hard. Like, what are you doing?
Then you wear the dashiki and they're like,
yes, exactly.
What
like, who does he think he is? And not only from them, but possibly from the African that is from the continent or from that specific country that's going to start being like, you're not from here. So, like, you're playing this dual thing of, like, who am I trying to
No matter how much you
impress?
try, you're not gonna
do it. Whereas though, if we just cut it out and be accepting of both cultures, like there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to embrace the Black American culture, African American culture, and not feel like you're going to be ostracized from your Nigerian culture, or that you're not sounding Nigerian anymore if you're, talking in a different dialect, or you're presenting yourself differently somewhat. I feel like we all evolve and we all grow, and with growth, we should be able to accept certain things. And accepting your culture into my culture and that culture, it's one big culture, and at the end of the day, we're all viewed completely the same, right? We're completely the same individuals. When we look at our ghettos, when I was there, our ghettos are very similar if you think about it. Our prosperity is very similar. Our thought process is very similar. And our understanding that the outside world doesn't like us is very similar. So why not just lump that all together and create this dynamic of just amazing people, right? Yeah. Like that's what this show is hopefully going to get a hold of. That's my hope, and I know that's what we discussed, is that everybody can definitely bridge the gap and make everything one unit, guys.
Yes, that's it, guys. Please join the conversation. We'd like to know what you think, and join the topic. Let us hear from you. Definitely. Comment below, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace out.
Peace.